Tennessee holds some of the oldest and most puzzling stories in the Southeast, from hidden stone forts and ancient cairns to strange mound sites and legends that reach back before written history. The state is filled with places that feel older than the land itself. These mysteries still shape the quiet hills, thick forests, and winding rivers, leaving questions that no one has fully answered. The Bell Witch Cave's pre-settler legends. When you stand outside the Bell Witch Cave, the first thing you notice is how quiet the place feels. Not peaceful, exactly, more like the land is holding its breath. The cave sits at the base of a limestone ridge in Adams, Tennessee, partly hidden by trees in the curve of the hillside. There's a small stream running nearby, and even that sound seems softer than it should be. People talk a lot about the Bell Witch haunting from the early 1800s, but the story didn't begin with the Bell family. The cave already had a name, a mood, and a shadow over it long before any settler ever stepped onto this land. That older chapter is the part most visitors don't know, and it's what makes the place feel so strange the moment you get close. If you walk toward the entrance, there's a steady flow of cool air coming out. It doesn't matter if it's July or January. The cave breathes like it has its own rhythm. The opening isn't huge, just a jagged mouth in the stone, but once you step inside, it feels bigger than you expect. The walls narrow in places, then open again, and your footsteps echo in odd ways. Even with a flashlight, there are pockets of darkness that seem thicker than the rest. Long before the Bells lived here, the native people of the area knew the cave well. For them, a place like this wasn't just part of the landscape. Caves were seen as doors into the world beneath our own, a place where the living and the spirits could cross paths if they weren't careful. There were old stories passed down through families who lived in this region long before American settlers arrived. These stories talked about a woman-like presence in the rocks. She didn't have a single name, because stories shift from group to group, but the idea stayed the same. She was a spirit of the ridge, someone who lived inside the stone. She wasn't fully kind or fully cruel. She was a watcher, a guide, and sometimes a trickster. Hunters said she could help them if she chose, or she could lead them in circles to test their patience. Some tales described her voice echoing through the cave when people came too close without offering respect. When you stand there today, it's not hard to imagine why. The cave has an odd way of changing your sense of direction. Even modern visitors say they feel lost after only a few steps into the darker chambers. If you turn off your light, the darkness doesn't just sit in front of you, it presses around you. If you breathe too fast, the silence seems to push back. It's not surprising that the first people who lived here treated the cave with caution. You can't blame them for thinking something lived inside. A presence, a voice, or even just the cave itself acting alive. The land around the cave holds pieces of the past. Archaeologists have found pottery fragments, stone tools, and signs that people moved through this area for thousands of years. The region was part of a vast network of mound-building cultures. While the cave itself doesn't show a clear sign of ceremonies the way some others do, it's close enough to major ancient sites that its importance was almost certainly understood. In many parts of the Southeast, caves were used for offerings or rites meant to guide spirits. When you look at the Bell Witch Cave through that lens, it feels less like a random spot on a farm, and more like a threshold people were careful not to disturb. There's a pattern in the old legends that stands out. The spirit woman of the ridge wasn't purely fearsome. She was reactive. If someone approached with respect, she helped. If they mocked her or acted careless near her cave, she answered with tricks or with a strange, heavy feeling that followed them home. You see echoes of this in later stories. The Bell Witch haunting is full of moments where the spirit acted playful one second and harsh the next. People today usually treat those as ghost story details, but if you trace them back to the older tales, the personality lines up in a way that feels too close to ignore. Hunters from the early 1700s who passed through the region told stories that sound familiar today. Some said they heard footsteps behind them near the ridge. Others said they saw faint lights drifting by the cave entrance at night, like fireflies moving in steady patterns instead of random flickers. A few French traders recorded hearing singing near the bluff. Not a full song, just a faint tone that rose and fell in a way that didn't match the wind. These tales weren't written with the idea of a Bell Witch in mind. They came from people who had no clue a family named Bell would ever settle there. They were simply describing what they saw and felt near a place that had a long, strange history. When the settlers arrived, they didn't have the same beliefs about caves. They saw the land as practical space fields, forest, water, but even then the cave made people uneasy. Kids used it as a place to dare each other, but the stories they came home with were always the same: whispering sounds in the dark, something tugging at their clothes, torches blowing out even when the air felt still. These weren't stories told in dramatic ways. They were simple remarks from kids who didn't have a reason to make up legends yet, and that makes them harder to ignore. By the time the Bell family moved to Adams, the cave already had a quiet reputation. Not a famous one, but enough that locals warned each other not to spend long inside. The Bell children, being curious and adventurous, explored the cave often. One of the most repeated stories from that time claims that a boy got stuck when part of the floor shifted, trapping him in a pocket of rock. According to the tale, an invisible force pulled him free just as he ran out of air. Whether or not it happened, it shows what people already believed about the cave. Something unseen lived there, something with a mind of its own. The more you look at the timeline, the more it feels like the Bell Witch story didn't begin with the family at all. It was the next chapter in something older. The personality of the spirit that struck the Bell family seemed to match the woman in the stone figure from the older native stories. Playful, sharp, unpredictable, and very protective of her space. She responded to disrespect instantly. She could be helpful one day and mocking the next. It's a pattern that shows up across centuries of stories, tied to one specific place on the Tennessee frontier. Today, when you visit the cave, the guides tell the known stories, but the atmosphere does most of the work. The inside is cool and damp. Your shoes slip a little on smooth stone. The air smells like wet earth and minerals. When people reach the back chamber, some say they feel a sudden chill across their shoulders. Others feel pressure around their ears, like someone is standing close behind them. A few visitors say small rocks fall near their feet, with no sign of loose stone above. These moments don't happen to everyone, but the fact that they happen at all keeps the cave's old reputation alive. Some visitors don't feel anything unusual. They walk in, take the tour, step out, and say it's just a cave. And that's part of what makes the place mysterious. A real mystery doesn't scare everyone. It doesn't impress everyone. It picks and chooses. It reacts. That's how older cultures described it, and that's how people talk about it today. The land has a personality, and the cave is its center point. If you stand at the mouth of the cave long enough, the area starts to feel older than the farms around it. The ridge rises over you like a wall of time. The stream trickles over rocks worn smooth by centuries of feet passing the same path. The shadows shift as the trees move in the wind. You can almost imagine someone from hundreds of years ago standing in the same spot, feeling the same strange pull from the darkness inside. Whether you think the cave holds a spirit, or whether you think it's just a place with a strong atmosphere, something about it feels like it remembers every story told about it. Every whisper, every footstep, every moment of fear or respect. That memory lingers in the air, in the stone, in the cold breath of the cave drifting out onto the daylight. And even without the Bell family's later story, the cave would still feel the same, like a doorway into something deeper than the rock itself. The strange stone fort of Old Stone Fort State Park. If you walk into Old Stone Fort State Park on a quiet morning, the first thing that hits you is how peaceful the place feels. The trees stand tall on both sides of the trail, and the sound of rushing water echoes from the two rivers that circle the site. It looks like a simple hiking spot at first, but when you reach the open field at the center, you feel something different. The air gets still, the space feels older than everything around it. And that's when you notice the walls, long, low stone lines stretching out across the land, like the remains of something built with purpose. This is Old Stone Fort, one of Tennessee's oldest and most mysterious places, and nobody completely agrees on why it was built. The name fort is a little misleading. When early settlers found the place, they saw stone walls and assumed it must have been some kind of military site. But once archaeologists studied it, they realized the walls wouldn't stand up to any kind of battle. They're not tall, and they're not thick enough to defend against a real attack. Instead, they stretch in a long arc, bending with the shape of the land, almost like they were made to guide people along a path. When you stand there today and look at the layout, it feels less like a fort and more like a gathering space, somewhere with meaning for the people who lived here long before settlers arrived. The site sits on a high plateau between two rivers, the Duck and the Little Duck. Over thousands of years, the water carved deep gorges into the rock, leaving a natural peninsula that looks like a stage or a giant platform. The ancient builders took advantage of the shape and added the stone walls to complete the design. When you see it from above, the layout looks intentional, not random, not sloppy, but planned. That alone makes the place feel strange, because the builders left no carvings, no written hints, and no tools behind to explain why they worked so hard to shape this land. What we do know is that the site is old, older than many civilizations people talk about in school. Most archaeologists agree that Old Stone Fort was built more than 2,000 years ago during what's known as the Middle Woodland period. This was a time when several indigenous cultures were building mounds, stone structures, and earthworks across the eastern United States. Many of these sites had ceremonial purposes, connected to the sun, the seasons, or events that mattered to the community. Old Stone Fort fits that pattern in some ways, but in others, it stands alone. One of the oddest things about the site is the front entrance. It lines up with the sunrise on the summer solstice. If you stand in the right spot early on that morning, the sun rises perfectly between the walls and lights the open field inside. It feels too perfect to be an accident. The builders knew the sky. They knew exactly how the seasons moved. They built this place so that the first light of the longest day of the year would pour into the heart of the enclosure. Standing there as the sun lifts over the trees, you get the sense that you're watching something people have watched for thousands of years. The stone walls themselves don't look like much until you get close. They're made of stacked slabs of limestone, most of them flat and easy to shape. They aren't tall, but they stretch for nearly half a mile. That's a lot of work for a structure without houses, without storage pits, without signs of daily life. People didn't live inside Old Stone Fort. They came here for something else. Some believe it was a gathering place for ceremonies. Others think it might have been used for rites connected to life, death, or renewal. A few researchers think it may have been a place for music and sound, because the cliffs and open spaces create natural echoes that bounce in unusual ways. If you stand in the center and clap your hands, the echo doesn't sound normal. It rolls across the open field and bounces off the cliff faces like a soft drum. You can imagine hundreds of people gathered here, listening to music or joining in a ceremony where sound mattered just as much as the rising sun. When the wind moves through the trees and the two rivers roar below, the whole place feels like it was chosen for the way it sounds as much as the way it looks. Local stories add even more layers to the mystery. Early settlers said the area felt watched, though they couldn't explain why. Hunters reported hearing footsteps behind them on the trails when no one was there, and long before the park existed, locals warned children not to wander too close to the river bends after dark because shadows moved strangely there. Whether those stories came from real events or just the uneasy feeling the place gives off, they added to Old Stone Fort's reputation as a place with energy that outlived its builders. There's also the question of why the culture that built the fort suddenly abandoned it. There's no record of conflict, no burn marks, no sign of disaster. It's as if the people simply stopped using the site and moved on. When you walk the trails today, it's hard not to wonder what changed. Did the river paths shift? Did the community split or travel elsewhere? Or did the meaning of the site fade as generations passed? The silence around that question makes the place feel even older, like the land is holding a memory it doesn't share easily. The waterfalls around the fort add another layer of atmosphere. On all sides, water drops into deep pools carved over centuries. The sound of falling water blends with the wind and turns the whole place into a natural amphitheater. You can see why the builders chose this spot. It has a sense of protection, but also openness. When you stand at the cliff edge and look down at the roaring water, you feel how strong the land is. And when you turn back toward the field, you feel how carefully it was shaped. Modern visitors come here mostly to hike and relax, but many say the same thing without being prompted. The place feels old, not just historically old, but old in a way you can sense. People say the air seems heavier in the center of the site. Some mention feeling watched, the same way early settlers did. Others say the sound of the river fades for a moment when they step inside the old walls, as if the land wants their attention. It never feels threatening, but it does feel aware. If you visit around sunset, the shadows stretch long across the grass and the stone walls look sharper than they do in daylight. You can walk the full length of the enclosure, tracing the shape of the ancient walls with your hand. The stone is cool even in summer, and you can feel the texture worn down by time. It's easy to imagine people walking the same path 2,000 years ago, bringing offerings, sharing stories, or waiting for the solstice sunrise. There's a sense of tradition, even though the meaning behind it has faded. Today, Old Stone Fort State Park protects the site and keeps it open for anyone who wants to explore it. The trails are well kept, the fields are peaceful, and the rivers still carve their slow paths through the gorge. But even with the picnic tables and visitors enjoying the scenery, the site feels untouched in a deeper way. It's one of those places where modern life sits lightly on top of something ancient. The past feels close, almost close enough to hear if you stay still long enough. Standing inside the fort at dusk, you feel connected to people you'll never know. They shaped the land here with intention, with care, and with a purpose that still whispers through the stone. Whether the site was built for ceremony, for sound, for gathering, or for something we haven't guessed yet, the mystery is part of its charm. Old Stone Fort doesn't give away its secrets easily. It invites you to step inside, listen, and feel the weight of time around you, just like countless others did long before the world around it changed. The Mound complex at Shiloh and its sudden abandonment. When you walk into Shiloh National Military Park, most people expect the Civil War history to be the main focus. But tucked deeper inside the park, past the cannons and markers, there's a place that feels much older. The ground rises suddenly into smooth shapes, almost like waves frozen in earth. These are the ancient mounds of Shiloh, built long before any battle was fought here. They sit on a wide bluff above the Tennessee River, quiet and steady, with a kind of presence that makes you slow down without thinking about it. And even if the Civil War made this land famous, the mystery wrapped around these ancient earthworks runs much deeper. The Shiloh Mounds are part of a large complex that once held plazas, earthen pyramids, and ceremonial spaces. When you stand in the middle of it, it doesn't feel like a random pattern. The mounds were placed with intention. Some are tall and flat-topped, shaped to hold buildings or gather people. Others are low and rounded. The whole layout covers dozens of acres, forming what once would have been a major center for the people who lived here around 2,000 years ago. What makes the place feel strange right away is how quiet it is. Birds still sing, and wind moves through the trees, but there's a heavy stillness underneath. The air feels thicker in some spots, almost like a leftover echo from the age when families walked these paths, held gatherings on the plazas, and watched the sun rise over the river. The culture that built these mounds came long before European settlers ever saw this land. They built with purpose, and they stayed here for centuries, until suddenly they didn't, and nobody knows why. Archaeologists call the people who built Shiloh part of the Mississippian tradition, though this site sits at the earlier end of that era. These were skilled builders who shaped the landscape into something meaningful. They understood how to move earth with simple tools, piling basket after basket until the mounds reached their final forms. Some of the mounds are arranged in a rough square around what would have once been a central plaza. Standing there today, it's easy to picture this area filled with people, markets, ceremonies, families gathering or sharing stories. It was a real community, not just a ritual site. The first mound that usually catches your eye is Mound A, the largest one here. It rises above the others, long and broad, with a flat top that would have supported an important wooden structure. Maybe a council house, maybe a chief's home, maybe something more ceremonial. There's no written record to say for sure. The structure itself is long gone, leaving only the shape of the earth behind. But the size of the mound tells you it mattered. People don't build something that large unless the building on top held real meaning. One of the most interesting parts of the Shiloh complex is how closely the builders interacted with the river. The Tennessee River bends sharply around the bluffs here, creating natural protection and easy access to travel. The people living at Shiloh would have watched canoes drift by, carrying goods, stories, and visitors from far-off regions. This site wasn't isolated, it was connected. And yet, at some point, the connections broke. The people left. The mounds stood empty for reasons nobody can fully explain. As you walk along the trail, the ground rises and falls in gentle curves around you. Some mounds blend so neatly into the landscape that you almost miss them until you're right beside them. Others stand out clearly. Each one has its own character. Some have burial chambers, which tells us this wasn't just a place for ceremonies. It was part of people's everyday lives. Others show signs of large wooden buildings once anchored into the earth, with posts sunk deep into prepared floors. Archaeologists have found traces of clay, charcoal, and ash, suggesting that these structures were rebuilt many times over generations. This tells us the community here was stable, long-lasting, and invested in shaping its home. And then, almost suddenly, everything stops. The people left the Shiloh complex around the year 1100. They didn't burn it. They didn't destroy anything. They simply stopped building, stopped repairing the structures, and moved on. What's strange is that many other mound-building centers from this era show signs of stress, famine, conflict, or shifts in climate. But Shiloh doesn't show clear signs of that. It's almost as if something changed socially or spiritually, and the community simply decided the place no longer held the meaning it once did. When you stand in the plaza and look around, you feel that absence in the air. The mounds still rise in their old patterns, but the stories behind them are missing. There's a kind of loneliness to the space, a quiet that isn't empty, but waiting. Some believe the people simply moved to other growing centers, drawn into the culture that would later flourish at places like Cahokia. Others think the community split into smaller groups and drifted along the Tennessee River basin. And then there are theories that something shifted in their belief system, maybe a change in leadership, maybe a lost tradition that made the old center no longer fit their needs. Without written records, all we can do is imagine. One of the most haunting parts of the Shiloh mounds is how well they blend into modern life. Visitors walk by them without knowing what they're seeing. Kids run up the slopes for fun. The Civil War markers sit only a short walk away, pulling most of the attention. But once you stop and let your eyes adjust, the shape of the ancient world comes back into focus. The mounds form patterns. The plaza takes shape. You can picture a wooden roof rising above Mound A, with smoke drifting into the air as people gather below. The river plays a big part in the mood of the place. Its sound carries up the bluff in a steady hum. On windy days, the trees sway and the river's voice blends into something almost musical. This landscape didn't change much after the ancient people left. The bluffs are the same. The water still carves the land in slow, steady patterns. The stone beneath your feet is the same stone they walked on. That connection makes the place feel timeless. Walking along the trail at sunset is especially powerful. The light hits the mounds and turns the grass golden. The shadows stretch long across the ground, and you can almost picture figures moving along the paths. The tree trunks turn dark against the sky, and the mounds look sharper, more defined. It's one of those times when the past doesn't feel far away at all. You feel like you're stepping onto a stage that's been empty for centuries, but still remembers the voices that once filled it. Even though people talk more about the Civil War battle that took place here, the older mystery feels deeper. The war lasted 2 days. The mound builders lived here for generations. Their story shaped the land long before gunfire ever touched it. The sudden abandonment of the complex makes the place feel unfinished, like the last chapter was never written. You walk through it and feel the gap. Something important changed here, and the land absorbed the silence. Today, the park keeps the mounds safe, and visitors can walk among them freely. There's no loud signage or flashy displays. The mystery remains quiet, subtle, part of the place itself. And maybe that's fitting. Not every ancient site wants to explain itself. Some hold on to their secrets because the land is stronger with them intact. When you stand on one of the mounds and look out over the trees and the river, you feel a mix of peace and curiosity. You know people once stood right where you're standing, watching the same water and listening to the same wind. You know they built a community here, with intention and meaning. And you know that one day, without warning, they walked away and left the land to rest. That's the part of the Shiloh mounds that stays with you. The beauty of the place is obvious, but the silence behind it is what pulls you in. You can walk the trails, listen to the river, feel the weight of the earth beneath your feet, and wonder what made an entire community leave a place they worked so hard to create. It's a mystery that lingers in the air, shaping the atmosphere just as much as the mounds shape the ground. The ancient cairns of the Cumberland Plateau. If you've ever driven across the Cumberland Plateau, you know how the land shifts into something quieter and older than the rest of Tennessee. The air feels heavier, the trees seem to lean in a little closer, and the hills stretch out like waves that froze mid-roll. Up there, hidden among the ridges and deep woods, are piles of stones that look simple at first glance. But when you stand in front of one of these cairns and think about who built it and why, the whole place takes on a different mood. These cairns aren't random. They're built with care, stacked one stone at a time, long before written history ever touched this part of the world. And that is where the mystery begins. The cairns of the Cumberland Plateau come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. Some are small shoulder-high mounds, maybe 10 feet across. Others stretch much wider, almost like low, rough platforms. When you see them tucked between boulders or perched on ridgelines, it's hard not to feel like each one was placed with an intention we still don't fully understand. They don't match natural rock slides, and they don't look like the result of clearing farmland, since many stand in places no one would ever try to farm. It's the thought behind them that unsettles people. These stones didn't move themselves. Someone had a message to leave behind. Most people believe ancient indigenous groups built the cairns. The plateau was home to different cultures across thousands of years, from hunters following game to later groups building mounds in the river valleys. But the cairns don't fit neatly into any single tradition. They don't match burial mounds in structure or soil composition. They're not arranged in patterns typical of known ceremonial sites. They sit alone, sometimes in clusters, sometimes completely isolated, and many show signs of age so extreme that plant roots have grown right through their centers, holding them together like stitches. Theories grow quickly around that kind of mystery. Some people think the cairns marked old trails, helping travelers cross the rugged terrain. When you stand by one on a high ridge and look out at the land rolling off into the distance, that idea almost feels right. You can imagine someone placing a pile of stones to tell the next traveler, yes, you're on the right path. But others argue that the placement is too random for trail markers. Some cairns are far from any known route, tucked deep inside forest where no clear destination lies ahead. Another idea is that the cairns were memorials. It isn't hard to picture a small community placing stones to honor someone who died during a hunt or while traveling through the plateau. But again, no bones or artifacts turn up inside most cairns. They're clean, empty, almost intentionally empty, as if the emptiness itself mattered more than anything placed inside. There's also the possibility of ancient signal points. High ridges make perfect vantage points, and stone piles could have once held torches or marked places where smoke signals were sent across the valleys. This theory fits the plateau's geography, especially near bluffs that look out over long distances, but no burn marks or supports have been found to back it up. And then there are the stories people don't share as often, the ones whispered around campfires. Some say the cairns were spiritual markers, boundaries between places where everyday life played out and places meant for rituals or prayers. When you walk around the plateau at dusk, you can see why this theory exists. The air feels different up there. The woods get dark fast, and the silence settles in like a blanket. You could almost believe the cairns mark a line you shouldn't cross unless you know what you're doing. Not all mysteries come from the distant past. Some come from the present. Hikers still report strange experiences near certain cairns. Nothing dramatic, just small things that stick with you. A sudden drop in temperature, a feeling that you're being watched, the sense that you took a wrong turn even though the trail is clear behind you. A few people talk about hearing faint tapping, like a stone shifting against another even when no one is touching it. Maybe it's just the forest settling, or maybe the plateau remembers more than we think. When you're standing by one of these cairns, it's easy to feel like time works differently. The moss on the stones is thick, the edges have softened from centuries of rain, and the forest has grown up around them as if protecting something. You can try to picture the person who placed the first stone. What were they thinking? Were they marking a moment, sending a message, claiming a space? And if it was a message, was it meant for someone in their own time or someone in ours? Archaeologists approach the cairns with care. They know better than to jump to conclusions, especially when the site gives so little to work with. The lack of artifacts is strange. Most ancient structures leave behind clues, shards of pottery, charcoal, tools, bones, but the cairns remain stubbornly empty, as if the builders wanted to avoid leaving anything that could be traced back to them. That kind of silence is rare in archaeology. You often learn as much from what's missing as from what's found. One thing researchers agree on is that the cairns are old. Some may date back thousands of years, long before the rise of big mound-building cultures. They may represent a memory from a time even older than the structures people normally associate with the region, and that makes the plateau feel even older, like a library where most of the pages have been torn out or buried under moss. Today, the cairns sit in state forests, off-trail clearings, and quiet corners of the plateau that most visitors never reach. You can visit some of them, though the exact locations are often kept vague to protect them. When you do find one, it doesn't shout for attention. It just sits there, quiet and steady, as if waiting for the right person to ask the right question. Places like this don't need big legends to make an impact. The silence alone does the work. When you walk away from a cairn, you feel different. Maybe it's the weight of time pressing in. Maybe it's the thought that people stood in the same spot long before you, building something they thought would last. Whatever their reason, the cairns still stand, still resisting weather and age, still raising questions that no one has fully answered. In the present day, the Cumberland Plateau is a favorite place for hikers, campers, and people who love the quiet beauty of Tennessee's high country. The trails are clean, the air is cool, even in summer, and the long views over the valley feel almost untouched. But the cairns remind you that the land isn't empty. It holds stories, some known, some hidden, some forgotten, and some that might never be explained. If you stumble across a cairn on a long walk through those woods, take a moment to stand there. Listen to the wind moving through the trees. Feel the cool air coming off the rocks. Look at how the stones fit together. You don't need to disturb it. Just take in the feeling that comes from knowing you're standing in a place shaped by hands you'll never meet. It's a humbling feeling, the kind that stays with you long after you head back down the trail.